or of helping any person who is involved in the commission of that offense to evade the legal consequences of his or her action, then the concealment or disguise of the true nature, source, location, disposition, movement or ownership of or rights with respect to property or currency, knowing that such property or currency is a proceeds of crime. Then we also have illicit enrichment or unexplained wealth. That is a significant increase in the assets of a person that he or she cannot reasonably explain in relation to his or her lawful income. That is to say, an inexplicable gap between a person's total wealth and their lawfully acquired wealth. Then we also have bribery in the private sector. We also have abuse of functions. And we have embezzlement, misappropriation, or either diversion of property or currency. Then, what is very typical in our society, influence peddling, or trading in influence. Then, quickly, we have obstruction of the administration of justice. That is to say, the use of physical force, stress, or intimidation, promise, offering or giving of an undue advantage to induce false testimony, the use of physical force, stress, or intimidation to interfere with the exercise of official duties by a judge or a law enforcement official, where a public officer refuses or fails without reasonable excuse to cooperate with the OSP when information is requested or lawful assistance is sought from that public officer, or where a person fails to comply with a lawful demand of the OSP, where a person fails to produce a document or provide information requested by the OSP, where a person fails to produce property or currency declared to be seized by the OSP, where a person conceals or attempts to conceal property or currency liable to seizure by the OSP, where a person knowingly furnishes false information to the OSP, where a person refuses to grant the OSP access to premises or refuses to submit to a search, where a person assaults an officer of the OSP in the performance of his or her functions, where a person obstructs an officer of the OSP from performing his or her functions, and where an officer of the OSP communicates confidential information to an authorized person or discloses the personal details of an informant to a third person without authority. The lecturer in me was coming out there. It is instructive to state that the OSP has the mandate to investigate and prosecute these offenses, whether or not the offenses were committed in Ghana or in a foreign country, so far as the act of conduct constitutes a crime in Ghana. The OSP, ladies and gentlemen, has completed a review of all the alleged cases of corruption and corruption-related offenses before it. Currently, the OSP is investigating 31 active cases, and it will, in due course, commence the prosecution in the courts of the cases it considers probatively strong. There is no case commenced by the OSP pending in the courts at the moment. I inherited one court case, that is the Republic against Mahama Ayariga and another, which I discontinued in October after a careful scrutiny of the available evidence led me to conclude that the Republic will be unable to prove its case on the standard of proof required in criminal cases, that is, proof beyond reasonable doubt. Let me also state that the assignment and full dedication by the government of a 10-story building at South Ridge, Accra, for the sole use of the OSP, and the steps taken and being taken by the Office of the President and the Chief of Staff in the establishment and maintenance of the OSP are highly commendable and a testament to a commitment to the fight against corruption. Ladies and gentlemen, upon my assumption of office on 5th August 2021 as the second Special Prosecutor of the Republic, I noticed that the OSP had not been operationalized, and it was without its own staff and necessary resources. The fight against corruption had, in effect, been thrown in reverse for 3 years. I immediately triggered the processes to set up and operationalize the office, to staff it with specialized trained personnel, and to fit it with the required material, resources, and equipment. By so doing, the fight against corruption has been resuscitated and we will carry on the renewed fervor during my tenure in office. As the institution specifically tasked with taking steps to prevent corruption, I resolve that in the coming year, the OSP will institute and strengthen measures to prevent, suppress, and repress corruption more efficiently and effectively than has ever been done in this republic. This should portend hope that Ghana is taking concrete steps to drive down the incidence of corruption. I have commenced engagement with law enforcement and anti-corruption agencies, including the Attorney Generals, the National Security Secretariat, the Ghana Police Service, Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, Economic and Organized Crime Office, and the Financial Intelligence Center. I have also opened insightful interactions and meetings with foreign and diplomatic missions and international organizations in accordance with our mutual legal assistance regime and that of the UN Convention. I have invited the participation and collaboration of anti-corruption civil society groups, non-governmental organizations, and community-based organizations, the media, and investigative journalists to support the work and operations of the OSP in our collective efforts in combating corruption. I state with gratification that the response has been enthusiastic. Ladies and gentlemen, from January 2022, the OSP will institute, as part of its Pressure for Progress drive, an annual Ghana Corruption League table to assess perceived levels of public sector corruption in the estimation of experts and business people. In aid of this, public agencies will be ranked against each other on a corruption barometer, and the results will be published every 9 December. We have commenced discussions with the local chapter of Transparency International, that is the Ghana Integrity Initiative, which is going to be our main strategic partner on this program. Ladies and gentlemen, the OSP from January 2022 would also require all public institutions, departments, agencies, and companies to prepare and submit to the OSP integrity plans intended at assessing deficiencies in their regulations, procedures, policies, guidelines, administration instructions, and internal control mechanisms to determine their vulnerability and exposure to corrupt practices and the prescription of curative measures to manage such susceptibility to corruption and corruption-related offenses. I am also setting up internal control mechanisms at the OSP to prevent corruption at the OSP itself. The OSP would also carry out anti-corruption risk assessment and review from January 2020 of all major public contracts, legislation, and draft legislation. This is intended to avoid toxic deals and the prevalence of judgment debts and arbitration awards. The office would also undertake continuous education and information of the public and the publicizing of detected acts of corruption. The OSP would vigorously investigate and prosecute cases of alleged or suspected corruption and corruption-related offenses and recover proceeds of such offenses through property tracing of tainted property and currency in line with our vision of rendering corruption a costly enterprise. On another score, I look forward to the provision of adequate funding and the necessary material resources as stipulated in Article 6 and 36 of the UN Convention to carry out this most challenging and solemn mandate. I cannot help but state that without adequate funding and the provision of the necessary material resources, the good intentions of my staff and I would remain just good intentions with nothing concrete to show for it. As we mark International Anti-Corruption Day and Anti-Corruption Week, I invite all well-meaning Ghanaians, let's renew our mindsets and collectively let's help to turn the negative narrative of corruption, to transform this republic and place it on a solid developmental track. On this call, we must draw on the wisdom of hindsight in our pursuit of a fairer society. We cannot continue on the path of see no evil, hear no evil. Let us expose the evil of corruption. Let us eschew corrupt practices as we bear in mind that ours should be a life of live and let live in the national interest. We must transform our thinking and psyche from a ritualistic, gift-giving society marked by undeserved attainment of wealth to secure undue advantage in all spheres of life to one of merit-based rewards. This is our sure chance to curb corruption, and we cannot miss this opportunity. God bless us all. God bless Ghana.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. You just heard the official message from the SP. It's now time for questions from the media. I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Sami Dagon, and I'm your MC for today. So we'll take the first question from Elton John Broby from Multimedia Group Limited. Your question. Then after that, we'll take three in a row, and then SP answers, and then we take the next batch. So after Elton will be Wilberforce of Asasiri. And all right, so we'll take the next one from.
Maybe let me just answer. Elton, thanks. The last one first. You know, in terms of investigation and prosecution, the Act is very clear that the board cannot interfere with the special prosecutor in that. So the special prosecutor can go on that without the board's input or otherwise. The board cannot come close to any matters involving investigation and prosecution of persons. But what I stated was that not that we're going to prosecute all the 31 cases. I said that we have 31 active cases before us now. We finished an entire review, and those that will take to court for prosecution will be what we believe are probatively strong in terms of the evidence to match up to prove beyond reasonable doubt. The others will advise ourselves in the national interest as to how to go about them. And you know, putting things out there when you are not too sure whether you want to prosecute at this stage or not is that you may end up destroying people's reputations for life. Because immediately you mention that you are investigating this person or you are investigating that person, immediately there is a negative attachment to the persons, and that is why I have refrained from touching on the specific cases.
There was a second question as to how the OSP board is absent. What is something more?
Oh, I thought it was specifically in relation to investigations and prosecution. But you meant it generally. Well, generally, the other aspects it's something I work because, especially in respect of HR and staffing issues and policy-wise, without the board, we are disabled from doing a lot of these things. So we hope the board will be interested soon so that we can proceed with the comprehensive functions under the Act and the allies. question is multifaceted. All of us, without money, we can't do anything. We will be reduced to writing long letters without any force. Because we need money for everything, especially our operations. And the question as to whether what was allotted to us was sufficient, I would say generally in Ghana nothing is sufficient. And what was put there, I have seen. It doesn't match up to my expectations. But I cannot give up. I'll continue pushing the envelope. I see things written on paper, but I'll keep asking and I'll keep pushing so that we can get what we require to establish and operationalize this office well. Mind you, I keep saying, and every opportunity I get, I'll happen. When I inherited the office, there was nothing there. There was nothing. Yes, established under law, but its operationalization was zero. And so, to do this, we need the resources to put things in place. The various divisions ought to be established on the ground: finance, administration, operations, investigations, prosecutions, strategy, communications, asset recovery and management. All these have to be instituted. And in respect of all this, without money, we cannot do it. Sergeant can't do it. So we need them, and that is why I said that I'm looking forward to it, because I do not see it as a closed case. I will keep pushing, we will keep pushing, and we'll keep engaging so we get our operations. That was one I think I'm missing. You know, maybe I shouldn't say this, but strategy-wise, I'm not going to tell you who I've recruited or who I haven't recruited, or the number of people I've recruited and all that. Yes, you indicated that I said 250. It's not really my statement. It's from the 2019 Appropriation Act. That is the staff, the commencement base of the OSP. In the wisdom of Parliament, that is what is required to establish it from the onset. And if I'm starting from zero, it means my work is cut out for me, and I need to double up, and I need a board to do that. So. He's discriminating. He knows only two names. Sorry, say the last part again. Yes, the last part of what you just said. You are eating too much. Right, proceed. That's oh no. Should I should I should I do hers first? All right. Let me take the ladies first. Any interference so far? Have I done? No. And I stated in an interview somewhere that I do not really fear. If you are referring to political interference, I do not really fear that because before I took up this position, there are some assurances I cheated from the powers that be, and it's not everything I can say in public, but I've gone under, especially with traditional rulers. That's where I fear most. Yeah, I've gone around and I've told them something to tell royals that if any one of them shows up at my doorstep, Nana, where dear, John 20, I keep saying. So that is resonating. I'm not doing it publicly because I can't do that publicly, but that is resonating. It's the sides. That is what I fear most. The interference, church, friends, family. I have a family. Imagine there's a family meeting and someone has committed a corruption or corruption-related offense, and my family head is begging on the person's behalf. That is more difficult than if, for instance, president picks up the call to say, "Oh, this is a political person. Look the other way." That I do not fear. That I do not fear at all. And support, as I'm receiving, by and large, I'm receiving the support that I need. As I said, the commendable efforts of the office of the president, especially the chief of staff. She has been very, very helpful in the steps she has taken, steps she's continuing to take. Mind you, at this stage, there's still a little bit of a marriage because it's still being set up. I would have wished by now, as I'm coming in, it would have been set up so that the office wouldn't still need to tie a bit up to these institutions. Why you remember the second question? No, let me go to him first, because he has a laundry list from Dennis Law. The corruption league table is going to follow. We don't have to reinvent things. It's going to follow the format of Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index. And beyond the publication, of course, that is a thread of preventing corruption. We also have several mandates: investigation, prosecution. In the working that leads to the publication of this table, if we come across any case that is corruption or corruption related, we are going to tackle them. But as I said, this publication of the corruption barometer is intended to put us all on our toes. That if you are in charge of a public agency and persistently your organization is pulling the shorter end of the straw in terms of corruption and corruption-related issues, then it supposes that something awry is going on in your organization, and you need to set up. It will generate some conversation, and we hope with that we can change our mindsets as to how to operate in the public sector. Talking about election results, we're going to have agents all over. We're going to follow all pink sheets. We're going to follow all collation results. It has to end somewhere. And specifically, it is the mandate of the OSP to ensure that these things occur. So as we follow, any case that it's not as if we're witch hunting, it's not as if we're praying for people to do that. We wish that no one will engage in these evils. But any presiding officer, any returning officer who is minded to alter results or to willfully misstate the results that actually been obtained at the police stations should know that we will be coming for them to prosecute them. And then you talk about funding. You see, by law, our funding should come from several places. The main is from public resources, the government. And then we also have our own internally generated funds, which is the asset recovery part. But this is a chicken and egg situation. If we are not established well to go after deviants and offenders to disgorge illicitly acquired wealth, we will not be able to do it. So, the systems that are required in order for us to do this, that is what we are pushing for, and we are getting somewhere. We are not there yet, but we're getting somewhere at least. The indications so far, by and large, we will be able to do a bit. And if we get these resources by taking this illicit wealth from the system into the national coffers, there is a formula. There is a formula under the law for distribution. So 10% goes to the Attorney General. I know my brother and friend, the Attorney General, is waiting for his 10%. I was telling him yesterday, well, he should help me to be able to disgorge these these illicitly gotten wealth, so I can give him his 10%. 10% also goes to institutions that are relevant to our work. 30% goes to the OSP's operation cell, and I'm required to pay 50% into the consolidated fund. So the OSP has been designed to be a revenue generator. We hope that one day we will get to a point where the Ministry of Finance would actually rely on the OSP to balance its budget, because that is the idea. But I will keep saying we have to be established well first to be able to perform this important function. You got a second question? Sorry, say that again. Oh, we are not waiting for years. We are working. We started work. And as I said, we have faced several mandates in our object, and some that is intelligence gathering, some that is counter surveillance, some that has serious national security implications. These things, ideally, we cannot reveal them because they are in the national interest, national security. We are doing them, especially together with our national security and other agencies. And then, when it comes to investigations, I told you earlier, we have 31 active cases. So we are not waiting for years. But I said, arresting someone, it's not the same as going to court, prosecuting the person. So I can come to a person's residence or office, arrest them. But is that the end? What we are looking for in order to be able to bite well, not just scraping, but biting well, is that we have to go to court to prosecute some of these cases, which we think would shore up to the standard of proof required in criminal cases. And we are in the process of doing that. At the right time, when we go to court, you will know. But your name is Vida, right? Vida. We are not waiting for a number of years. We started working from 5th August, and we're still working. Yes, sir. Sir, I can barely hear you. some of these. I was hoping I wouldn't have to go into this website matter, but a little bit of it. Maybe it's time the public should know about it. The website which was there before my assumption of office on 5th August 2021 was not the website of the OSP. It was masquerading as the website of the office of the OSP because it had been put together by some private individuals who were phantom individuals and you couldn't find them. But we traced all the way to the United States of America as to where the domain name was purchased and all that. And we had to involve the Department of Justice of the United States and all that to have a shutdown right from August. So it was a very tough battle because from the end of where the domain name was purchased, their point was simple, that it's freedom of speech, and someone came to purchase a domain name. And if you looked at that domain name, it wasn't .gov.gh. It was some very weird formation. So when my name came up and I was going to be vetted, I started taking interest in the website, and I noticed that it was unusual. And indeed, when I came into office that very first week, actually the very first day, it became very obvious that there was a problem with the website. In terms of the website, we are building it from scratch because, as I said earlier, there was no website. It was something that was masquerading as the office of the Special Prosecutor website. So it's been built from scratch and it will be up soon. By looking at the various reports, you said yourself that it's half yearly. At the appropriate time, we will release the next report. You know, you also touched on the fact that there was a gap between November 2020 and August 5, 2021 when I came in. And so all these things would have to be reworked and things put in their right perspective before the next report to come out. But I cannot give you the details of the report we are yet to publish. Sorry, there was one, Ejapa. Said, if you notice, I have refrained from discussing specific cases. Yes, and it is intentional. But I said something that from January 2022, one of the things that we're going to do is a corruption risk assessment of all major public contracts. And if it is a major public contract, it is going to fall under our purview of assessing it in terms of its corruption risk. None will escape us. Yeah. Thank you. I hope you're not going to go to the merits of the case. Right, thanks. Let me take the second one. You know, causing financial loss is not directly under the mandate of the OSP. It goes to the Attorney General. That's why I took the trouble to table all the offenses that the OSP is mandated to investigate and prosecute. But in respect of causing financial loss, if it so happens that there is some corruption or corruption-related aspects of the causing of financial loss, then we will be very much interested. This is what I'm saying. It is not every time that someone causes financial loss to the state that invokes a corruption aspect. The person may have taken some reckless business decisions. That does not necessarily mean that the person was corrupt. But there are some cases of causing financial loss too that ring in forcefully an issue of corruption. If it is the fact that the person was being corrupt or the person was being corrupted or some corruption-related aspects that led to causing financial loss, then I will be carving out that from the Attorney General to prosecute. Please, you get a distinction. Then, grabbing. We invited him in November. We're in December. In legal investigation and prosecution, that is just like a day. We are still on it. And here I'll say, I think I have his permission. The IGP has been very helpful in this regard. The police and the OSP are working together forcefully in respect of this case. And so, indeed, the docket itself has been handed over by the IGP to the OSP, and we are in the middle of the investigations. So, merely inviting a person to the OSP doesn't mean that the very next day the person is going to put before court. You invite the persons, you take their statements if they want to talk. The law says they can keep their silence if they so wish. If they want to talk, you take their statements. If they want to give statements, you still send your people down to the ground. Several persons were mentioned, assemblymen. The allegations was that he was chasing some assemblymen for alleged bribe money and all that. You have to do a very thorough investigation in respect of all these persons to come to the conclusion whether you have a strong case to prosecute. So, in answer to your question, we are still investigating. The police has handed over their side of the investigation to us, but we are working with them in respect of that. So, when we come to a conclusion, it will be publicized as to what we intend to do or otherwise. Just like our conclusion in the Mahama Yariga case, when we came to the conclusion that it was unnecessary to go on because there was no evidence in that regard. If we decide, if we see that in law there is probative evidence to go on with that case, we will put them before court. It's not just one person, mind you. We will put them before court if we so decide. So we're still on the investigation side. Sorry, Manuel. Oh, okay. It's still discriminating. Right. Thanks, Emmanuel. You know, I do not see one mandate to be more important than the other. In the wisdom of Parliament, it says we should investigate, we should prosecute, we should recover assets, and we should prevent corruption. It's one aspect of preventing corruption. So if we say we're waiting for resources before we take up one of our major functions. So we have four major functions. We cannot say we're waiting for resources before we take up one function. We cannot also say that one function is more important than the other. This is a flagship. It is going to be our own localized CPI. We cannot sit down for TI to do it for it. And even in their case, it is more general. But here, it is going to be naming agency after agency and going into the perception in respect of that agency. It is for our own good. It is for our own betterment. I said we want to change the psyche, mindset. With that, some critical conversation would be formed in respect of how to change things. For instance, if we zero in on one agency and we come to the conclusion that it is based on this or that this agency is not functioning the way it's supposed to function, then we would have some foundation to be able to change the nature of the organization. And say, mind you, we are going to dovetail it together with what I said will also be requiring from public agencies, that is the integrity plans, in order to block the loopholes, the avenues for corruption. So these are all going together in a major drive to prevent corruption. Thank you. I think I can resume my seat now.